Hey guys, it's it's Matty D. And in today's video, I'm going to be reviewing episode 3 of WCW Monday Nitro. It was on September 18th, 1995, and it comes from Johnson City, Tennessee. And actually, it was a Nitro that got trounced by Raw. Raw got a 2.7 rating, and Nitro actually got a 1.9, which was I'm pretty sure, nearly 100% sure it was the lowest Nitro rating so far. Obviously, it's only 3 weeks in, but I suppose that's exactly what happens whenever you don't have the luxury of the Lex Luger versus Hulk Hogan heavily hyped up main event. Really, the kind of hook here is the updates from Fall Brawl that happened the night before. There, Johnny B. Bad beat Brian Pillman. DDP defeated the Renegade to become the WCW television champion. Harlem Heat won the WCW tag team titles from Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater, who I've never, aside from just hearing them mentioned, I've never seen them wrestle. I've no idea who they are. Arn Anderson defeated Ric Flair in a pretty good sounding match over 20 minutes long. And Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger beat the Dungeon of Doom, and pretty handily, to be honest with you. They beat Kamala, Zodiac, the Shark, Ming, and afterwards, because they'd won the match, Hulk Hogan was entitled to 5 minutes alone in the ring with Kevin Sullivan, the Taskmaster, who's basically the manager of the Dungeon of Doom. And the craziest thing happened. The Giant came out. This is obviously the guy we know nowadays as the Big Show. This night was kind of his debut. He, earlier on in the show, in the pre-show actually, before Fall Games, he debuted with the Dungeon of Doom monster truck, and it destroyed Hulk Hogan's motorcycle. And he came out after the main event and just choked the life out of Hulk Hogan and just left him lying. So we start off, Mongo and Bobby and Eric Bischoff are here, and Mongo's got Fifi, and apparently, or is it Pepe? Just going to consult my notes. Pepe the dog. Pepe the dog is back by popular demand, according to Mongo, and they are just talking about what's going to happen on Nitro, and then all of a sudden there's these crazy sirens blaring, and the announcers are like, we need to go back and see what this is about. And Kevin Sullivan and the Giant rock up. Sullivan gets out of a rock up in the back of an ambulance that's reversing. So Kevin, the Taskmaster, comes out, Giant comes out, and he cuts a promo on Hulk Hogan where he boasts about hurting him and says that he's the true immortal. And something that I always forget that they did very early on in these days, they introduced the Giant almost as the son of Andre the Giant. So that's why, he wasn't called the Big Show, or he wasn't called Paul White. He was the Giant. And Mean Gene throws a reference in here and says that his father would be let down by him, but the Giant, he disagrees, and he does this insane laugh that's, on one side it's very corny and very cartoony, but at the same side, this is a guy who's literally just debuted. He's only been in the business for a year, and he's cutting a promo. He's really, bigging it up, and it would fit in perfectly fine in the 1980s. And it's not a bad promo. The laugh's a bit corny, and the thing with the ambulance is a bit strange, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And we'll see a bit more of what happened during Fall Games later on, so I'll talk about that later on. But first of all, we have the Nitro debut of the American Nails, Scotty Riggs and Marcus Bagwell come out to this awful American Males song. I'm going to do an impression of it, but it's just like constantly, American Males, American Males, American Males, American Males. And it's almost this awful promo, or awful theme song that seems so corny and seems like a song you would have heard in the 1970s. So they come out and they've beat the Nasty Boys at Fall Brawl. So they started off well, and they're taking on the Blue Bloods here, Bobby Eaton and William Regal, and I'm so excited to see Bobby Eaton in action. Obviously he very sadly passed away this year. this is kind of the tail end of his career where he's in a tag team with William Regal, and he's called Earl Bobby Eaton, the Earl of Eaton or something along those lines, and him and William Regal are basically traditional British gentlemen, but I don't get a chance to enjoy them wrestling this time, because when they're on their way out, only Bobby comes out for a start, and he's being attacked by Harlem Heat. It's implied heavily that William Regal was attacked backstage already by Harlem Heat, and they come out kind of like very heelish. They come out with Sherry Martel, and they demand a match with the American males, which is it's really strange, because it's kind of like, we're the top tag team. We won the tag team title championships last night, and we feel like we're being neglected not being on Nitro, so we're putting our titles on the line. So it's very strange promo. Booker T, you can already tell the man is just amazing on the microphone. He's so intense, he's so fired up. It's just that's the one issue I have. Are Harlem Heat heels, or are they not? Because this is attacking people behind their backs backstage because they're better is a very heelish thing, but they were attacking other heels, which would suggest a face thing. But then they're very brash and they're very arrogant, which is a heel thing. So it's very hard to know. The pacing's really off. And there's a lot of confusion too, because they say that Nick Bockwinkel's not here, which means that the match usually wouldn't be sanctioned for the belts, but this time it's going to be. And there's a lot of confusion as the match goes on whether they actually are sanctioned or not, and it's a bit odd, but it's not a bad match. Harlem Heat, they're really high on the offense. Booker hits the scissor kick as a transition move, and there's a sign that kind of, while it's just, the match is mostly Harlem Heat just getting the heat, but that was not intentional. But yes, the Harlem Heat are getting the heat, and there's a sign saying we want it Raw, which is strange, because you'd wonder why they're promoting Raw while they're at Nitro and front row of Nitro as well, which it just seems odd to me. There's talk about Sherry Martel and Colonel Robert Parker being intimate now, because they had a little something going on at Fall Brawl, and Mongo actually asks Bobby if he's had a thing for Sherry Martel, because he's heard rumours, and Bobby just says that she's a friend and they shared a few diet drinks together, whatever on earth that means. He's playing it down and he's just being awesome. But yeah, most of the match is just Harlem Heat constantly on the offense. There's a little tiny glimpse of hope for the American males, and at that stage it's about to get snuffed out, because Sherry Martel gets on the apron. She's going to spray something or hit the males with something, but Colonel Parker runs out. He drags Sherry Martel and lifts her into his loving arms, and Sherry doesn't seem annoyed, even though it's just completely blown her spot. And she leaves very happily with Robert Parker. And during the whole schmaltz of that, I think Booker gets a bit distracted. He kind of lifts up Buff Bagwell as if he's going to hit him with a pump handle slam, but Bagwell falls on top of Booker. The referee, 1, 2, 3, and there's new tag team champions, unless next week they decide Nick Bockwinkel from the championship committee says that they're going to completely undo that and strip the titles of the American males and give them back to Harlem Heat because it was unsanctioned. That's it. That's new tag team champions. There's that surprise factor that Eric Bischoff always tried to instill on Monday Nitro, where you watch it and you might have just seen some people win the tag team championships the night before, but now they've lost it. It's kind of mad, and it is something that happens, to be honest with you. It's bad sometimes having the surprise factor, sometimes it's good, but I think here it was pretty cool to see, and just nice to see that anything can happen. So like a 4 out of 10, there wasn't much of a contest here, but I really liked the finish, and it's kind of cute, the stuff with Sherry Martel, even if it's a bit strange. So we come back from the break, and Macho Man Randy Savage is here with all his charisma, trying to hypnotize us with this little clock going backwards and forwards. He says, like, you're getting sleepy. And then he tells us to snap out of it and snap into a Slim Jim. So Macho Man's just being the usual Macho Man and being awesome, because I really, really like him, and he's so fun. I will not be praising Macho Man anywhere near enough during these reviews, because he is so good and he deserves so much praise. But it's entertaining. We come out here, it's a Ric Flair promo again with Mean Gene, and I'm really excited for it after last week's promo with Lex Luger, because it was so strange and it was so entertaining. Flair's mad here though. He has this real intensity. Something makes me think that at Fall Brawl, Brian Pillman interfered to give Arn Anderson the win because he's mad at Flying Brian, who's taken on tonight. He's mad at Arn, obviously, and tells Arn he's going to deal with him because he's broken this rule amongst the boys that yes, we can get into your schmoz, we can fight amongst ourselves, but we do not bring outsiders. That's Flair's whole gripe with Arn. And he says that after he's done with Brian Pillman, he's coming for Arn Anderson. Flair's just so intense. There's little hints that he's a babyface later on in the show, which we'll cover very soon. And if he is now, that was a great way to start. That was a good promo, a really good promo, and I enjoyed Ric Flair's intensity and his seriousness from last week, because last week was mostly, it was kind of funny and kind of silly, which is great, but Flair meant business tonight, and meaning business makes business. You know, it makes the show hot, it makes the show feel important, it makes the show feel intense. So I really enjoyed that promo. Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff comes out next. He's been on a bit of a losing streak recently. He's been kind of down on his luck, but a hypnotist or a psychic, Gary Spivey, I think he's called, hypnotized him the night before at Fall Brawl. This is actually a thing that apparently happened. So he's back to being Mr. Wonderful. He comes out with a mirror. He has this theme song that's absolutely awful. It's so operatic and slow and kind of burns your ears. And by the end of it, you know, I have always heard good things about Paul Orndorff. I've heard Eric Bischoff say about how much of a gentleman he is in his podcast. Jim Cornette, who obviously is very controversial at all times, has nothing but good things to say about Paul. I think, I shouldn't be saying this if I'm wrong, but I think Paul actually passed away very recently, and it was quite sad for Cornette and Bischoff, and they paid tribute to him. I'm near certain because I listened to a podcast recently where Cornette said lots of good things about Paul. But point is, despite all this, by the end of this entrance, I hated him. I wanted to see him get beaten so bad by the next man he's taking on, Johnny B. Bad. And this is exciting. I've never seen him before. I've heard that his gimmick's very dated. His entrance theme was very dated. He kind of, what he was dressed in was very dated. He had like flares and a t-shirt gun of some kind, and a robe that said when you're hot on the back of it, which I thought was cool. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, but I was interested by it, and I found it very refreshing just to see Johnny B. Bad for the first time. I've heard so many things about Mark Mero. I've heard about his WWE run being a flop, but not so many negative things about him and his work in WCW. So it was interesting to see. And I mean, I think like that Johnny B. Bad was decent here. Orndorff, he targeted his eye at the start of things. Johnny started to make like kind of a mini comeback after Orndorff distracted himself with his mirror. He's just started looking at his mirror ringside, and Johnny B. Bad hit this insane dive, and he hit a top rope axe handle. And these guys, they give their all, even though they're not high flyers, even though they're heavyweight kind of ground-based wrestlers. They really do. They push themselves on Nitro, and you can tell everybody's getting super behind the project. Even if the commentary, Mongo's commentary, it lost its charm a wee bit tonight. It was more annoying than amusing, like it has been recently. It felt like he was trying maybe a bit too hard, and I loved his commentary in the past few weeks. But he said that Bobby said that I can't remember, he said he believed something, and Mongo was like, oh, you believed your wife when she told you your shorts were clean? And Bobby the Brain Heenan just seemed genuinely like, why is this guy hired? He seemed confused that Mongo was hired, and he wasn't great tonight, to be honest with you. But you know, two out of three isn't bad. I enjoyed him recently. So after the axe handle, Orndorff, he reverses like a kind of, Johnny B. Bad tries to pin him by pulling his legs back, but Orndorff sits on his face, which is very, very, very amusing to see in wrestling. It's always one of those ones that looks really weird if you don't watch wrestling. Orndorff sits on his face, he holds him in for the pinfall, and he cheats and steals the win. So I think it's just a win. Johnny B. Bad's very credible. He's a former television champion. It's just a way of getting Orndorff over and saying that he's back to being Mr. Wonderful, and it was fine. It was fine. It was a treat to see two people work who I've always heard and read things about, but I haven't seen them very much. Like, I think maybe 5 out of 10 for this one. It really wasn't bad. So next up is an absolutely iconic segment that I loved, where it was back at the announce team. Mongo and Eric Bischoff were talking about how they were invited to Los Angeles the week before to hang out with WCW wrestlers while they were filming their pretty cool Baywatch episode where Vader was involved in it, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Sting. And Mongo and Eric said they got out there and Bobby the Brain Heenan wasn't invited, and boy did Bobby just looked hurt, to be honest with you. He just looked really sad, and I felt bad for him for not getting an invite. It was a bit of a sad thing, but they cut to this footage anyway, and it's a bunch of girls. They're on a beach, and they're helping Macho Man Randy Savage bench press, which is such a strange thing to do on a beach. It's very odd behaviour. I suppose maybe he's down there filming, so Randy's just getting his workout in. But he does a couple of bench presses, and then things get dangerous because Kevin Sullivan, who's kind of in disguise, he looks like he's actually dressed up as David Hasselhoff or something, comes up and starts choking Randy with the barbell. Randy kind of frees himself in a panic, and he gets hit by the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan. He hits him a couple of times, and eventually Ric Flair comes in to make the save, which, like I said earlier on, it seems so babyface-ish. He seemed babyface-ish in the promo, and then helping Randy like he did here as well. It seems like they're kind of going with a Flair being face, maybe, sort of thing. But it was quite a brutal beating for such a funny, kind of amusing segment of just seeing Randy Savage out there bench pressing. So quite interesting for sure. On the subject of Randy Savage, Mean Gene's out in that ring, and he introduces him down as one of the all-time greats, and let's be honest, that's 100% true. Randy Savage comes down and he says that he's kind of mad that Ric Flair tried to help him because he doesn't trust him. He's mad at the Taskmaster and says he's going to get him when he can, and he's mad at Lex Luger and Sting and Jimmy Hart, and he actually says the three of those are going to be probably joining the Dungeon of Doom soon, which is very eerie because it is not long until Jimmy Hart's in the Dungeon of Doom. So Randy's being portrayed as a bit of a psychopath here, as somebody who's a bit paranoid, but actually he's on the money with this one, which is interesting to see for sure. Lex Luger comes out because he's kind of tired of being called a liar and untrustworthy, and Mean Gene, he says, guys, give a bit of decorum here, which is just so amusing. He's so funny. I love everything about Mean Gene. I could watch a whole show of Mean Gene interview segments. He is so brilliant for all these things and for interviews. He actually earlier on, he told off Ric Flair for saying ass. I forgot to mention that. He was so offended. He was like, you can't say things like that, Rick. He seemed kind of abused by it, but he seemed angry as well. Sometimes he seems like that angry school teacher, Mean Gene, which is always tickles me. He's just absolutely fantastic. But there is mostly decorum here. Lex makes Randy admit he'd like to be world champion, but it's not really much of a given because everybody would like to be world champion. This is the thing, we're being world champion. It's so far away. There's one world champ in the company. Everybody else is down below that world champion, and it means so much that nobody in their right mind would say they don't want to be world champ. That's just a given. There's no chance at all of that. So I don't think Lex has given Randy much of a concession to make. In fact, who was it? Yeah, Lex makes Randy admit it, but like I say, everyone does. And Randy says, okay, I've admitted that I want to be champion, and maybe you can't trust me because of that, but I want you to admit, Lex Luger, that you cheap-shotted me, but we don't really get anywhere. There was something at War Games. Randy thought Lex cheap-shotted him. It's a bit of a will he, won't he? Is he a heel? Is he a babyface? Same with Flair that they're doing, but it doesn't come to much. The Mean Gene cuts us to a break, and afterwards Eric Bischoff says there was a bit of a fight that went on and they were separated. So next up, the commentary team let us know that they're going to show us what happened at Fall Brawl the night before between Hulk Hogan and the Giant. So we see the best segment. It is so, so, so funny. I love it to bits. It's on Main Event, I believe. It's a show that's kind of there to hype up the pay-per-view. And Mean Gene's there. He's in, I think I say where it is here. They are in, my handwriting's awful. It's so hard to read things that I put in here sometimes. They're in one of the Carolinas, North Carolina or South Carolina, and Mean Gene's got his shades on. He's got dozens of fans there. It's like a dozen, to be honest with you. And he's looking so cool, and he's introducing Hulk Hogan. And speaking of cool, here comes down the Hulkster in a Harley Davidson, and he's got his shades on. He's a bit red looking, as if he has actually been motorbiking for a long time. I believe Eric Bischoff says later on, whenever he's talking about the Sturgis bike rally, that a lot of guys would go down there. I know Hulk Hogan was an avid motorcyclist because he got gifted one by Eric Bischoff, and he gifted Eric Bischoff one, so that does make a lot of sense. But he's saying he's been seeing a bunch of red, white, and blue flags, just your classic Hulk Hogan promo. It's really nice, and he seems so happy. But then disaster strikes. Mean Gene's like, "Look over there, everybody!" And everybody turns their head, and there's a big monster truck, and it's careening right towards Hulk Hogan and Mean Gene and the gang. So they run for their lives. And just in time, because this monster truck drives right up and smashes Hulk Hogan's bike. It goes right over it. Gene's shouting and screaming. It cuts to the camera of Hulk Hogan, and he's here like super livid, like he's shaking with anger that his motorbike's being destroyed. It's such an awesome, awesome segment. The Giant drives over it again, and then he reverses behind it, and Hulk Hogan's mad. Giant wheels down his window, and he's poking his head out, and he's laughing. That's that same kind of laugh that he did at the start of the show, just that maniacal, evil genius laugh. And Hulk's pounding on the monster truck, and he's livid, but his bike's destroyed, and I'm assuming the Dungeon of Doom. That's what's painted on the monster truck, so we know the Giant's alignment already. The Dungeon of Doom monster truck just drives off and leaves Hogan to his bike's wreckage. It's just so fantastic. They also show you war games at Fall Brawl whenever the Hulkster's in the ring with the Taskmaster and he's about to take him to task, and then the Giant comes out and he comes into the cage, he manhandles the referee, he no-sells a couple of Hulk Hogan punches, and then he chokes out Hulk Hogan, and at the end of it goes, and as Bobby the Brain Heenan says very eloquently and very just a really good thing that I'm glad that he brought up. He says that Hulk Hogan's neck was snapped by the Giant like it was a cheap, like it was the cap of a cheap bottle of whiskey. And I thought it was so profound and sold what happened so intensely well. And for something so cartoony, it's fantastic that they've done that. It really is. So the Giant and the Hulk Hogan stuff, yes, we know it's going to get corny, but it's not off to a bad start. And the Giant, he is cartoonish, but in the 80s, this would have been amazing and it would have done gangbusters. If it was exactly the same, you didn't need to say the Giant needed to be more realistic, because that cartoony style was perfect for the 80s, just maybe not so much the mid-90s. So next up, it's our main event. It's Flying Brian versus Ric Flair, and Flair is focused as anything. He comes out and takes it to Brian Pillman. He hits the chops. You can tell that Brian, he's got more of an edge. He looks really good. He looks really heelish. He's muttering into himself and laughing like a madman. He cheats. He hits a drop kick out of the air into Ric Flair, and Flair's selling so well for him. He's selling like a mad thing for Brian Pillman here. Pillman, he misses a dive, but he still stays competitive. And then, just sort of out of nowhere, to be honest, Flair grinds him down a wee bit, hits the figure four, locks that in tight, and Brian Pillman taps. So it's a good Flair match. He taps somebody out with a figure four leg lock, which almost never happens. It's so rare, and it was awesome to see here. I really, really enjoyed this one. I don't know what's happening with Brian Pillman, but he's really on the way up now. You can tell he's going crazy. He's moving towards that loose cannon gimmick, and obviously, unfortunately, I should say, he's kind of moving out the back door with WCW, because he hits a stride more in WWF, very soon. So it was entertaining. I would give that match a 7 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed it for what it was. Every match in the show was the same. It was the opener. I didn't like it for in-ring action. It was kind of confusing and one-sided, but I like the surprise factor. The match before this that I've already forgotten, so it must have been that great. No, Johnny B. Bad versus Paul Orndorff. It was really entertaining. It was back and forward. It was a way of getting Paul Orndorff over, so I enjoyed that as well. And Flying Brian versus Ric Flair, super stuff. Super stuff. 7 out of 10. He wants pronouns, pal. Ric Flair wants Arn Anderson out, and he tells Arn Anderson that he will get his ass checked next week on Nitro. And Eric Bischoff's like, we need a censor for Ric Flair. How dare he say ass on television twice in a row in one episode? It's absolutely disgraceful. And Flair just, you know, he's just the baddest man on the planet. He says the word ass. The guys then, they review the action. They say that next week there's going to be Disco Inferno versus Alex Wright in Disco Inferno's Nitro debut. I cannot wait for this. They say that Randy Savage is going to get his hands on the Taskmaster to hopefully finish off that feud. And they also say, forgive me, it's Colonel Robert Parker is going to be introducing some wrestler that he's managing. He's a fella from Japan. I will learn a bit more next week, and whenever I'm covering that match. But very interestingly here, while this is all going on, Bobby the Brain Heenan says that something's going on in the back. Like while Eric Bischoff's cutting his promo, Bobby's pointing at his headset and saying, there's something going on in the back. There's something going on in the back, Eric. And Eric just very calmly says, there is something going on in the back. And there'll be something going on next week before he cuts to the hype for the future matches. So not a bad episode, guys. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and 3 matches all had really good merits. And the promos, the characters, that's what I love about WCW. I love Flair, I love Randy Savage, I love Hulk Hogan and Mean Gene, and all these wrestlers who I didn't get to see much of because I watched WCW in 1997, like Johnny B. Bad and Paul Orndorff and Flying Brian. It's very entertaining, and I'm thoroughly enjoying watching Nitro, even if I don't always get a chance to review it and record it. But I've checked in here. Hopefully I'll check in again soon. I've been months... Sorry, that's my other channel, Matty D. Oh, you can tell I'm very good at this, can't you? This has been Matty D. Thank you very much for checking out my reviews, and I will speak to you all again hopefully soon, okay? Thank you.